Here, Natalie, sign these papers. It's time to focus on our family now, Marcus said, sliding a folder across the elegantly decorated gift table at our baby shower. His voice was casual, but his eyes were hard, unblinking. Before we jump back, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I glanced down at the document title, Transfer of Ownership, Innovate Tech Solutions. The beautifully decorated room, filled with pink balloons and expectant smiles from our guests, suddenly felt airless. My mother-in-law Judith stood behind him, nodding encouragingly, a possessive hand on my husband's shoulder. "Is everything all right?" asked my best friend Zoe, approaching with a concerned expression. I smiled calmly, despite the rage building inside me. "Actually, no. My husband has just asked me to sign over my company, the one I built from nothing, at our baby shower." I lifted my gaze to meet Marcus's eyes. "I think we need a moment. Dominic?" At my word, 3 professionally dressed individuals stepped forward from different corners of the room. "Ms. Foster, is there a problem?" asked Dominic Carter, the head of the security team I'd quietly hired 3 weeks earlier when I'd discovered the first document draft in Marcus's email. "My name is Natalie Foster, and 4 years ago, I was just Natalie Reed, the founder and CEO of Innovate Tech Solutions, a healthcare software company revolutionizing patient monitoring systems for hospitals across the Pacific Northwest. I'd built my business from the ground up after completing my master's in biomedical engineering and spending 3 years developing the core algorithm that would become our flagship product. What started as late nights coding in my tiny apartment had grown into a thriving company with 32 employees and a valuation of $22 million. My software had helped save countless lives by detecting critical changes in patient vitals before traditional monitoring systems could. That's how I met Marcus Foster at a healthcare innovation conference in Seattle. Tall, with perfectly styled, dark hair and a disarming smile, Marcus had the polished charm of someone who moved comfortably through the upper echelons of society. He approached me after my presentation, eyes bright with what I mistook for admiration. "Your patient prediction model is remarkable. The accuracy rates you're achieving are something my hospital network has been searching for," he said, extending his hand. Marcus Foster, Chief Strategy Officer at Pacific Northwest Medical Group. One business lunch led to another, and soon our professional relationship evolved into something more personal. Marcus was attentive, ambitious, and seemed genuinely interested in my work. 6 months into dating, he invited me to meet his family at their sprawling waterfront home on Whidbey Island. The warning signs were there from the beginning, though I chose to ignore them. The first dinner with the Fosters was an exercise in subtle disparagement disguised as curiosity. "A tech startup?" Judith Foster asked, swirling her wine with manicured fingers. "How fascinating that you've managed to keep it afloat in such a competitive field. Most of these little ventures fail so quickly." Harold, Marcus's father, had been more direct. "Technology is a young person's game, isn't it?" "What's your exit strategy? Surely you don't intend to run this startup forever." I explained that Innovate Tech wasn't just a stepping stone. It was my life's work, my passion. The algorithms I'd developed were saving lives, and I was committed to expanding our reach. Marcus jumped in, his hand squeezing mine under the table. "Natalie's being modest. Her company is positioned for acquisition by one of the major healthcare systems. We're talking potentially life-changing money." I turned to him, confused. We had never discussed acquisition as a goal. In fact, I'd been clear about my vision for independent growth. Marcus smiled at me, a look that I would later recognize as warning, "Play along." Our relationship progressed rapidly after that. Within 10 months, Marcus proposed during a weekend trip to Vancouver. The ring was ostentatious, a family heirloom that Judith had insisted he use. I said yes, swept up in what felt like a whirlwind. Romance, and the intoxicating feeling of being accepted by a family that seemed so perfect from the outside. The undermining began subtly after our engagement. Marcus started scheduling strategy sessions with me to discuss Innovate Tech's future. His suggestions increasingly centered around preparing the company for sale. "You've created something valuable, Nat," he would say, "but the real win is leveraging that value before the market shifts. We could take the acquisition money and start something together, something bigger." I held firm to my vision. Innovate Tech was growing steadily, our contracts with hospitals expanding, our software saving more lives every month. I had no interest in selling. The wedding was lavish, orchestrated almost entirely by Judith with minimal input from me. I compromised on almost everything except the guest list, insisting that my small circle of friends and my team from Innovate Tech be included. The ceremony took place at the Foster family's church, followed by a reception at Seattle's most exclusive waterfront venue. During the reception, I overheard a conversation between Marcus and a hospital executive I didn't recognize. "Your bride's company, Fascinating Technology, would be a perfect addition to our digital health portfolio," the man said. Marcus nodded confidentially. "We're working on bringing it into the fold, just a matter of timing." When I confronted him later that night in our hotel suite, he dismissed my concerns. "It's just business talk, Nat. People expect a certain narrative. Besides, what's wrong with keeping our options open?" After the wedding, we moved into a beautiful home in Queen Anne that Marcus had chosen. I continued running Innovate Tech, which was entering its most successful period yet. Our patient monitoring system had just received additional FDA clearances, opening up new market opportunities. We were hiring rapidly, and I was working longer hours than ever. Marcus's comments about my work schedule became increasingly barbed. "Another late night? I thought marriage might shift your priorities a bit." Then came the pregnancy, unplanned but not unwelcome. I was excited but also determined that motherhood wouldn't derail the momentum of Innovate Tech. I brought on Tyler Rodriguez, a brilliant developer I'd worked with previously, as co-founder and operations lead to help manage the growing company while I prepared for maternity leave. This decision infuriated Marcus. "You brought in a partner without discussing it with me? I should have a say in decisions that affect our family's financial future." "Tyler is operations, not equity," I explained. "And Innovate Tech is my company, not a family asset." His expression darkened. "Everything is a family asset now, Natalie. That's what marriage means." The pressure intensified as my pregnancy progressed. Judith began stopping by our house unannounced, often when Marcus wasn't home. "Marcus is worried about you, dear," she said during one such visit, settling herself at our kitchen island. "All this stress can't be good for the baby. Have you considered what kind of mother you'll be if you're always at the office?" Meanwhile, Harold began making casual references to bringing Natalie's project under the Foster Group umbrella. The Foster Group, I learned, was the family's investment company, primarily managing old real estate holdings and some medical facility investments. The implication was clear. They viewed my company as something to be absorbed. At 6 months, pregnant, I walked into Marcus's home office to bring him coffee and noticed an email open on his computer. The subject line caught my eye. "Read Foster Transition Plan." Read, my maiden name. I shouldn't have looked, but something in me needed to know. The email was from Harold to Marcus, with Judith copied. Attached was a document outlining a strategy for transferring ownership of Innovate Tech to the Foster Group. The language was clinical, discussing emotional factors and leveraging the child's arrival as an opportunity to complete the transition. A line near the end made my blood run cold. "The baby shower seems optimal. Public setting, emotional context, family pressure. Have papers ready." I took photos of the screen with my phone, my hands shaking. Then I forwarded the entire email thread to my personal account before deleting the forward from Marcus's sent folder. He never noticed, a testament to the superior technical skills he so often dismissed as my hobby. That night, I lay awake beside Marcus, studying his sleeping profile in the darkness. Who was this man I'd married? How had I missed that my success threatened rather than impressed him? Most importantly, what was I going to do about it? The next morning, I called Zoe, the one friend who had consistently expressed reservations about Marcus and his family. I need a lawyer, I told her. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Someone discreet, not connected to Seattle's social circles. Zoe connected me with Catherine Zhao, a razor-sharp attorney specializing in business protection and high-conflict divorces. Catherine reviewed the evidence and helped me develop a protection plan for both myself and Innovate Tech. They're counting on public pressure and your emotional state, Catherine explained. We need to counter with preparation and witnesses. Together, we developed a strategy. First, I secured the company, updating operating agreements, backing up all code repositories and documents to secure servers, and implementing new security protocols. I brought Tyler fully into my confidence, and he helped strengthen our technical safeguards. Next, I protected myself financially, creating separate accounts and documenting all company and personal assets. Catherine filed preliminary paperwork that could be activated immediately if needed. Finally, I hired Dominic Carter's security team, professionals with experience in both executive protection and evidence collection. For the 3 weeks leading up to the baby shower, they conducted discreet surveillance, documenting meetings between Marcus and his parents, and once, troublingly, between Marcus and one of Innovate Tech's main competitors. The baby shower was Judith's idea. "Let me handle everything," she insisted. "You focus on staying healthy for my granddaughter." I agreed, knowing it would give her a false sense of control. The event was planned for the Evergreen Gardens, and upscale venue overlooking Puget Sound. Judith had invited 70 people, mostly her friends and business associates, with only a handful of mine. The theme was lavish. A new air blooms, with pink roses and gold accents everywhere. The morning of the shower, I dressed carefully in a blush-colored maternity dress that concealed a recording device Catherine had provided. Dominic's team was already in position at the venue, one posing as a waiter, another as a photographer's assistant, and Dominic himself as a venue security manager. Marcus was attentive as we drove to the venue, his hand occasionally resting on my rounded belly. "Excited for today?" he asked. "Very," I replied, thinking of how different my expectations for the day were from his. The event began as planned. Guests arrived, gifts accumulated, and Judith held court, introducing me as our Natalie, with a possessiveness that made my skin crawl. I played my part, smiling graciously, accepting congratulations, pretending I didn't notice Marcus and Harold, having intense conversations in corners. After lunch was served and the customary shower games played, Judith clinked her glass. "Before we open gifts, I think Marcus has something special for Natalie." The room quieted as Marcus approached with a leather folder in hand. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Natalie, with the baby coming, we've been talking about simplifying our lives," he began. "You've worked so hard building Innovate Tech, and now it's time to focus on your most important job, being a mother." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd, mostly from Judith's friends, I noted. "The foster group is prepared to assume ownership of Innovate Tech," Marcus continued, his voice taking on the polished tone he used for business presentations. "We'll ensure your team is well treated during the transition. This offer," he slid the folder toward me, "is more than generous, and it frees you from the burden of running a company while raising our daughter." The room felt suddenly silent, expectant. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, watching for my grateful tears, my relieved surrender. "Here, Natalie, sign these papers. It's time to focus on our family now," Marcus said, his voice casual but his eyes hard, unblinking. This was the moment they had planned for. The public setting, the emotional context, the family pressure, just as the email had outlined. They expected me to be blindsided, to feel trapped by social expectations and pregnancy hormones. Instead, I was prepared. "Is everything all right?" asked Zoe, approaching with a concerned expression, right on cue. I smiled calmly, despite the rage building inside me. "Actually, no. My husband has just asked me to sign over my company, the one I built from nothing, at our baby shower." I lifted my gaze to meet Marcus's eyes. "I think we need a moment. Dominic?" At my word, Dominic and his team stepped forward. The photographer's assistant had stopped taking pictures and was now recording. The waiter had positioned himself near Harold, who had started moving toward us. "Ms. Foster, is there a problem?" asked Dominic, his presence immediately shifting the energy in the room. "Yes," I said, standing up with as much dignity as my 7 months pregnant body would allow. "My husband has just ambushed me with legal documents attempting to seize control of my company. I believe this constitutes coercion and possibly fraud." Marcus's face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. It's a family discussion." "Is that why you planned it for a public event?" I interrupted, projecting my voice so guests could hear. "Is that why the document is already filled out, requiring only my signature? Is that why you discussed using my emotional state as leverage?" I turned to face the confused guests. "I apologize for this uncomfortable situation, but I want witnesses to what's happening here. My husband and his family have been planning to pressure me into signing over my company. They deliberately chose this moment, believing I would be too embarrassed or overwhelmed to refuse." Judith stepped forward, her social mask slipping to reveal fury. "Natalie, you're clearly hormonal and confused. Marcus is only trying to help you. No one can run a company and be a proper mother." "Actually," came a voice from the doorway, "many women manage both quite successfully." Catherine Zhao walked in, elegant in a tailored suit, carrying her own leather portfolio. "I'm Catherine Zhao, Ms. Reed's attorney. And this," she gestured to a man entering behind her, "is Detective Wilson with Seattle PD's White Collar Division." A stunned silence fell over the room. Marcus looked from me to Catherine to the detective, comprehension slowly dawning on his face. "You set this up," he said, his voice low with disbelief. "No, Marcus, you set this up," I corrected him. "I just came prepared." Detective Wilson stepped forward. "Mr. Foster, we'd like to ask you some questions about a meeting you had last Tuesday with Michael Benson of HealthStream Technologies. We have reason to believe you may have been discussing proprietary information belonging to Innovate Tech Solutions." Harold moved toward his son protectively. "This is preposterous. My son doesn't need to answer any questions without our attorney present." "That's his right," the detective agreed. "But we do have a warrant to seize certain electronic devices and documents." He turned to Dominic. "Mr. Carter, your team has the specifics." What followed was a carefully orchestrated legal intervention that Catherine and I had planned for multiple contingencies. While the detective spoke with Marcus, Dominic's team served legal papers to both Marcus and Harold, temporary restraining orders preventing them from accessing Innovate Tech systems or contacting staff, and a formal notice that I was initiating divorce proceedings. Guests began leaving quickly, the festive atmosphere thoroughly shattered. Judith stood frozen, her social orchestration in ruins. For perhaps the first time in her life, she had no script to follow. I approached her, cradling my belly protectively. "You should know that I have copies of all the emails, Judith. The ones where you and Harold discussed using my pregnancy as an opportunity. The ones where you suggested Marcus remind her that mothers don't run companies." Her face paled. "You'll regret this, Natalie. Do you have any idea what this family can do to you?" I smiled, feeling oddly calm. "Actually, I do. That's why I've spent the last 3 weeks documenting everything. And now, thanks to this little event, I have dozens of witnesses to attempted coercion. Seattle's business community will be fascinated by how the Foster family operates." By late afternoon, the beautiful baby shower had been completely dismantled. Pink decorations were cleared away, gifts loaded into Zoe's car instead of Marcus's, and the elegant venue returned to its neutral state. I stood on the terrace overlooking the water, breathing deeply as Catherine finalized arrangements with Dominic's team. "We've secured all the devices specified in the warrant," Dominic reported. "The detective has taken Marcus and Harold in for questioning. It may just be preliminary, but it gives us time." "And you have somewhere safe to go?" Catherine asked. I nodded. "Zoe's place first, then a secure apartment Tyler arranged through a company connection. The locks at the house have already been changed." "You've thought of everything," Catherine said with admiration. "Not everything," I thought, my hand resting on my belly. I hadn't anticipated falling in love with a man who saw me as an acquisition target rather than a partner. I hadn't planned on fighting for my company and my independence while preparing to become a mother. But I had prepared for this day, for this moment when preparation met opportunity, when my business instincts proved sharper than Marcus's manipulations. The next 2 months unfolded in a blur of legal proceedings, security precautions, and prenatal appointments. Marcus initially tried to fight both the divorce and the business separation, but his position weakened considerably when the investigation revealed he had indeed shared confidential Innovate Tech information with competitors. His family launched a whisper campaign against me in their social circles, portraying me as an unbalanced pregnant woman who had used the Foster name to advance my business interests. But the evidence spoke for itself, and the carefully cultivated Foster family image began to crumble under scrutiny. When our daughter Lily was born 6 weeks after the baby shower, I held her in my arms in a hospital room guarded by Dominic's team, with Zoe and Tyler present instead of the in-laws I had once tried so hard to please. "She's perfect," Zoe whispered, wiping away tears as she looked at my daughter. "Yes, she is," I agreed, "and she's going to grow up knowing exactly what her mother is capable of." By Lily's first birthday, the divorce was finalized. The terms were far more favorable than what had been in that folder at the baby shower. Marcus received no stake in Innovate Tech, and his attempts to claim it as a marital asset were rejected, given the evidence of his plans to seize control. The Foster family's reputation suffered significant damage when details of their scheme emerged through the legal proceedings. Several of their business associates distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with such tactics. As for Innovate Tech, we not only survived, but thrived. The publicity, while initially concerning, ultimately showcased our resilience. Our patient monitoring system received major new contracts, and our team expanded to over 50 employees. Today, 3 years later, I sit in my office overlooking Seattle's skyline, a picture of Lily on my desk. She spends half her time with me and half with Marcus, who eventually accepted the reality of our separation. The Foster family has made occasional overtures about reconciliation, primarily to maintain a relationship with their granddaughter. I remain cordial but cautious. Sometimes I think about that baby shower, the moment when they thought they had me cornered, outnumbered, and emotionally vulnerable. They underestimated me in the same way so many had throughout my career. They saw my pregnancy as a weakness to exploit, rather than another source of strength. The security team I had hired changed everything that day, yes. But it was my foresight, my refusal to be manipulated, and my courage to stand up in that room of expectant faces that truly made the difference. I often tell young entrepreneurs, especially women, that success isn't just about building something valuable. It's also about protecting what you build. Sometimes the threats come from competitors, sometimes from market forces, and sometimes, sadly, from those closest to you who should be your greatest supporters. My daughter is growing up watching her mother lead a company that saves lives. She's learning that strength sometimes means preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. And she'll know that her arrival in this world wasn't the end of her. Mother's dreams. It was the beginning of a new chapter where both motherhood and leadership could coexist and flourish. The Fosters had tried to present me with an either-or proposition, either be a mother or be a CEO. In the end, I chose the option they never offered. I decided to be both, on my own terms. The first signs of trouble appeared 6 months into our marriage. Marcus had initially been supportive of my role at Innovate Tech, even boasting to his colleagues about my accomplishments. But as the company grew more successful, his attitude began to shift in subtle ways. The change was so gradual that I almost didn't notice it at first. It started with casual comments about my long hours at the office. "Another late night, Nat? The company can survive without you for one evening," he would say with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I brushed these remarks off, attributing them to a husband who simply missed his wife. Then came the questions about our financial arrangements. Marcus began suggesting that we consolidate our accounts for simplicity's sake. When I hesitated, pointing out that keeping my business finances separate made accounting cleaner, he accused me of not trusting him. "We're married now, Natalie. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours. Isn't that what you promised?" The manipulation was subtle but effective, making me question whether my caution was reasonable or a sign of my failure as a wife. The real shift happened after a dinner party at his parents' Whidbey Island estate, where Harold had proudly introduced Marcus as the next CEO of the Foster Group. As we drove home that night, Marcus was unusually quiet, his knuckles white, on the steering wheel. "Dad's getting serious about succession planning," he finally said as we crossed the bridge back to Seattle. "He wants me to take a more active role in expanding the family business." "That's great," I replied, genuinely happy for him. "You've always talked about modernizing their holdings. The Foster Group needs to diversify into technology. Healthcare? Tech, specifically." His eyes remained fixed on the road ahead. "It would make sense for Innovate Tech to come under our umbrella." The casual way he suggested absorbing my company, my life's work, into his family business made my stomach knot. "Marcus, Innovate Tech is doing fine as an independent entity. We just secured the multi-care contract, and our growth projections are excellent." He sighed as if I were being deliberately difficult. "Think bigger, Nat. With the Foster Group's resources and connections, you could scale 10 times faster. Besides, isn't that the dream of every startup founder? To be acquired?" "Not my dream," I said firmly. "I started Innovate Tech to transform patient care, not to flip it for a quick profit." Marcus fell silent for the remainder of the drive, but I could feel his disappointment radiating like heat. That night marked the first time I sensed that our visions for the future might be fundamentally incompatible. The pressure intensified after I announced my pregnancy. What should have been a joyous time for us both quickly became complicated by the Fosters' expectations. At a family brunch celebrating the news, Judith clasped my hands in hers, her diamond rings pressing uncomfortably against my fingers. "This changes everything, dear," she said with a smile that felt predatory. Baby needs its mother present. Full-time motherhood is the most rewarding career a woman can have." Before I could respond, Harold chimed in. "Marcus tells me you've been considering strategic options for your company. Very wise. The stress of running a business is the last thing you'll want with a newborn." I looked at Marcus, confused. We had discussed no such thing. He avoided my eyes, suddenly very interested in his eggs Benedict. The message was clear. The Fosters assumed, perhaps had been told, that my pregnancy would be the end of my role at Innovate Tech. The following weeks brought a parade of helpful interventions. Judith began sending me articles about executive stress during pregnancy and studies linking maternal absence to various childhood development issues. Harold introduced me to potential advisors who specialized in company valuation and acquisition strategy. Even Grace, Marcus's sister, got in on the act, constantly reminding me how she'd never regretted stepping back from her law practice to raise her children. Meanwhile, Marcus's behavior became increasingly controlling. He questioned my late meetings, suggesting they were irresponsible given my condition. He expressed concern when I traveled for a healthcare conference in my second trimester, though my doctor had cleared me completely. He installed a home security system that tracked when doors opened and closed, for the baby's safety, he claimed, though it also happened to log my comings and goings. I tried discussing these issues directly with Marcus, hoping to understand the sudden change in his attitude. "I thought you admired my work," I said one night as we lay in bed, the space between us feeling wider than the actual inches. "You used to brag about marrying a CEO." He turned to me, his expression softening momentarily. "I do admire you, Nat. But things are different now. We're going to be parents, and my family has certain expectations about how a foster raises their children. I'm not giving up my company to meet your family's outdated expectations," I said firmly. His face hardened again. "My family has maintained its position for generations by understanding what matters. Business comes and goes, but legacy is forever. Our child deserves the foster legacy, and that means being raised properly." "By properly? You mean by a stay-at-home mother while the father runs the business empire?" "It's worked for us so far," he replied without irony. That conversation replayed in my mind for days afterward. It was becoming clear that Marcus hadn't married me despite my ambition and independence. He'd married me with the assumption that these qualities were a phase that would naturally end when I became a foster wife and mother. The real wake-up call came during my second trimester. I had been experiencing severe morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, making office hours difficult. Tyler, my newly appointed co-founder, had been handling more daily operations, while I worked from home when possible. Marcus took this as a sign that I was naturally transitioning away from the company. "See? Your body is telling you what's important," he said one morning as I emerged pale and exhausted from the bathroom. "The company is already running without you there every day." His comment stung, partly because it played into my own fears about stepping back, even temporarily. That afternoon, determined to prove him wrong, I went into the office despite feeling unwell. I stayed late, reviewing our newest hospital implementation plans and catching up with Tyler on recent developments. When I arrived home after 8 p.m., I found Marcus and Judith sitting in our living room, identical expressions of disapproval on their faces. "We were worried," Marcus said coldly. "You didn't answer your phone." "It was on silent during meetings," I explained, already feeling defensive. "I texted you I'd be late." Judith stood, smoothing her immaculate slacks. A pregnant woman shouldn't be pushing herself this way, especially not for work that others could handle. She picked up her designer handbag. "Marcus, I'll leave you to talk sense into your wife. Remember what we discussed." After she left, Marcus's demeanor changed from concern to calculation. "My mother's right, Natalie. This isn't sustainable. You need to start delegating more, permanently." "I am delegating," I countered. "That's why I brought Tyler on. I'm not talking about operations, I'm talking about ownership." He sat forward, suddenly all business. "The Foster Group can acquire Innovate Tech now, at a premium valuation. You'd remain as a consultant during the transition, but be freed from day-to-day responsibilities. It's the perfect solution." I stared at him, finally seeing with complete clarity. This was never about my health or the baby, was it? This is about the Fosters acquiring my company. "It's about what makes sense for our family," he insisted. "The Foster Group has been looking to expand into medical technology. Your company is a perfect fit. Why struggle to grow it independently when we have the resources to scale it immediately?" Because it's mine, I said simply. I built it. I decide its future. His expression darkened. You're being selfish, Natalie. Think about what's best for our child. I am, I replied, my hand instinctively moving to my belly. I'm making sure she knows her mother doesn't give up her dreams because someone else thinks she should. That night, sleeping in separate rooms for the first time in our marriage, I began to strategize. If Marcus and his family were planning something, I needed to be prepared. The next morning, I called Tyler and asked to meet him off-site, away from the office where Marcus occasionally dropped in unannounced. Over coffee at a small cafe in Fremont, far from our usual downtown haunts, I confided my concerns to Tyler. He listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled. I've noticed some unusual inquiries about our company structure, he confirmed when I finished. A lawyer claiming to represent a potential investor asked for our operating agreement last week. I didn't think much of it since we're always fielding interest, but in light of what you're saying... Did you share it? I asked, alarmed. Only the standard public-facing version, nothing with the detailed ownership structure. Tyler's eyebrows furrowed. Natalie, if your husband's family is planning some kind of hostile move, we need to lock things down immediately. We spent the next 2 hours developing a protection plan for Innovate Tech. Tyler would quietly update our security protocols and back up all our intellectual property to secured servers. I would review our corporate documents with our company attorney to ensure there were no vulnerabilities that could be exploited. As we prepared to leave, Tyler hesitated. There's something else you should know. Marcus came by the office last month when you were at that doctor's appointment. He requested a tour of our server room and asked a lot of questions about our backup systems. He met my eyes directly. I thought it was just spousal interest, but now I'm not so sure. A chill ran through me. Did he have access to anything sensitive? Not directly, but he was very interested in our organizational chart and reporting structure. Wanted to know who would step up if you needed to take extended leave. The implications were clear. Marcus was mapping the company's vulnerabilities, perhaps looking for ways to argue that my absence wouldn't impact operations, thereby making it easier to push me out. That evening, I made an excuse about a prenatal yoga class and instead met with Zoe at her apartment. Unlike my other friends who had been charmed by Marcus, Zoe had maintained a healthy skepticism about him and his family from the beginning. They're too perfect, she'd observed after first meeting the Fosters. Nobody's that polished without hiding something. Now, as I explained the situation to her, Zoe's expression shifted from concern to determination. You need legal protection. Nat, not just for the company but for yourself and the baby. I'm not sure I'm ready to go that far, I said, though the weight in my stomach suggested otherwise. At least talk to someone, she urged. I know a fantastic attorney who specializes in both business protection and high-conflict divorce. Just a consultation to understand your options. I flinched at the word divorce, but nodded. Deep down, I knew that things with Marcus had moved beyond simple misunderstanding or family pressure. There was calculation behind his actions, a strategic effort to gain control over both me and my company. Catherine Zhao's office was deliberately understated, located in a converted warehouse in Georgetown, away from the downtown legal district where Marcus's social circle held sway. With her crisp bob and penetrating gaze, Catherine projected competence and discretion from the moment we met. I laid out the situation as objectively as I could, sharing concrete examples of Marcus and his family's behavior rather than my emotional reactions to them. Catherine listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions but otherwise letting me speak uninterrupted. When I finished, she sat back in her chair, her expression grave. Mrs. Foster, based on what you've described, I'm concerned that your husband and his family are indeed orchestrating a coordinated effort to separate you from your company. The pattern of behavior, questioning your commitment after pregnancy, pushing for acquisition by the family business, attempting to isolate you from your professional support system, suggests a deliberate strategy rather than casual family pressure. My throat tightened. Hearing someone else confirm my fears made them impossible to dismiss. What are my options? We need to approach this on multiple fronts, Catherine said, her tone shifting from concerned to practical. First, we secure the company against any potential hostile action. Second, we protect your personal financial interests in case this escalates to divorce. Third, we gather evidence of any potentially coercive or fraudulent behavior. She outlined a comprehensive protection plan, emphasizing the importance of documentation and witnesses. The Fosters clearly value their public image, she noted. That can be leveraged. They may be willing to attempt manipulation in private, but will be more cautious if they know their actions might become public. As Catherine spoke, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying began to lift. For weeks, I'd been questioning my own perceptions, wondering if I was overreacting to normal family dynamics or pregnancy hormones were clouding my judgment. Having an objective professional validate my concerns was both vindicating and empowering. Catherine recommended I consult with a security specialist, someone who could help document any attempts at coercion and ensure my physical safety if things escalated. Dominic Carter, she said, writing down a number. He's ex-military, now runs executive protection for high-net-worth individuals in sensitive situations. Completely discreet. My meeting with Dominic took place the following day at a private room in the Seattle Public Library. With his precise military bearing and watchful eyes, he initially intimidated me, but his manner softened as I explained my situation. "This is unfortunately common," he said after I finished. "Family businesses often view marriages as mergers. When one party doesn't comply with the expected terms, things can get messy." Dominic proposed a security strategy that included both technological and human elements. His team would sweep my devices for any spyware or tracking software, secure my communications, and provide discreet physical protection when necessary. Most importantly, they would help gather evidence of any manipulation or coercion. "The key is to be prepared without escalating," he explained. "We'll be invisible unless needed, but ready to intervene at a moment's notice." As I implemented these protective measures, my interactions with Marcus took on a surreal quality. I maintained a facade of normalcy, accepting his concerns about my workload with feigned gratitude while secretly strengthening my position. I attended the prenatal classes and doctor's appointments he insisted on accompanying me to, all while communicating with Tyler, Catherine, and Dominic through secure channels. Marcus seemed satisfied with what he perceived as my gradual acquiescence. He reported back to his parents that I was coming around to their perspective, that the maternal instinct was finally overriding my professional ambitions. Judith began including me more in family events, clearly viewing me as less of a threat now that she believed I was accepting the traditional foster wife role. Behind this compliant exterior, however, I was gathering evidence and fortifying my position. Tyler discovered that someone had attempted to access our company's financial records using administrative credentials that could only have come from my personal computer. Dominic's team identified spyware on my laptop that was capturing my keystrokes and screenshots, installed around the time Marcus had upgraded my computer as a thoughtful gift. Most damning of all was an email thread I discovered when borrowing Marcus's tablet to check the weather while he was in the shower. The conversation between Marcus, Harold, and their family attorney outlined a strategy for gaining control of Innovate Tech that involved leveraging Natalie's maternal transition and executing the transfer before she can change her mind post-delivery. The baby shower plan was mentioned specifically. Public setting limits potential for resistance. Emotional context makes refusal appear unreasonable. Family witnesses create pressure to comply. I forwarded these emails to my secure account and deleted the evidence of my snooping, my hands shaking with both anger and vindication. This was the proof I needed that the Fosters' concern for my well-being was a calculated front for their business ambitions. The final piece fell into place when I overheard Marcus on the phone with someone from HealthStream Technologies, one of Innovate Tech's main competitors. I had returned home early from a doctor's appointment, entering quietly through the garage. Marcus was in his home office, the door ajar. "The IP will be under Foster Group control within the month," he was saying. "Once the transfer is complete, we can discuss integration options." Yes, her team would be redundant at that point. No, that won't be an issue. She'll be focused on the baby by then. He was already planning to dismantle my company and sell off its valuable parts, likely terminating the team members who had been with me from the beginning, the people who had believed in my vision when no one else did. That night, I met with Catherine, Tyler, Zoe, and Dominic to finalize our counter-strategy. The baby shower was 10 days away, and based on the emails I'd discovered, that was when the Fosters planned to execute their takeover. "We need to be prepared for multiple scenarios," Catherine advised. "The ideal outcome is that your husband and his family back down when they realize you've discovered their plan and taken protective measures. However, we should be ready for a more aggressive response." Dominic outlined the security arrangements for the shower. "My team will be in position throughout the venue, one as waitstaff, one as a photographer's assistant, and myself as venue security. We'll be recording everything, and will intervene if any coercion occurs." Tyler confirmed that Innovate Tech was now technically secure. "All critical systems require multi-factor authentication that only you and I can provide. I've also prepared documentation of recent access attempts from unauthorized sources." Zoe, who would be attending the shower as my closest friend, would stay by my side throughout the event, ready to create a diversion if needed, or serve as a witness to any inappropriate pressure. "And I've prepared the legal paperwork," Catherine added. "Temporary restraining orders preventing access to company assets and, if necessary, divorce proceedings with documentation of financial manipulation and coercion." As we finalized these plans, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was anger at the betrayal, sadness for what my marriage had become, fear about facing my husband's powerful family, and anxiety about bringing a child into such a conflict. But underlying it all was a steely determination that hadn't been there before. The Fosters had underestimated me, assuming that pregnancy and impending motherhood would weaken my resolve. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The days leading up to the baby shower were tense. I maintained my role as the gradually yielding wife, allowing Judith to take control of the shower arrangements while I focused on resting and preparing for the baby. Marcus seemed pleased with my apparent surrender, becoming more affectionate and less controlling as he believed his plan was working. "You'll see, Nat," he said one night as we lay in bed, his hand on my swollen belly. "Once the baby comes, you'll understand that some sacrifices are worth making. Family is everything." I murmured agreement, thinking not of the Foster family legacy, but of the daughter growing inside me. What kind of example did I want to set for her? Would I teach her to surrender her dreams to meet others' expectations, or show her how to stand firm in the face of manipulation and control? The answer was clear. Whatever happened at the baby shower, I would not be signing away my company or my autonomy. The Fosters wanted to use my child as leverage against me, but they had it backwards. She wasn't my weakness. She was my strength. My reason for ensuring that neither of us would be controlled by their antiquated expectations. The morning of the shower dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a blush-colored maternity dress that Judith had selected, its modest cut and soft color projecting exactly the image of maternal submission the Fosters wanted to see. Beneath this compliant exterior, however, I was armed with both technology and resolve. The dress concealed a recording device provided by Dominic's team, and my phone held secure connections to Catherine and Tyler, ready to be activated at a moment's notice. Marcus was solicitous as he helped me into the car, his hand protective, at my back. "You look beautiful," he said, and for a moment I glimpsed the man I thought I had married. Attentive, admiring, seemingly supportive of me. It made what I knew was coming all the more painful. The evergreen gardens had been transformed under Judith's direction. Pink and gold decorations adorned every surface, with elaborate flower arrangements and a banner proclaiming, "A new air blooms." The guest list was predominantly foster family, friends and business associates, with only a handful of my own connections present. This, too, was strategic, surrounding me with people loyal to the foster family, minimizing potential allies. As we entered, I spotted Dominic in his role as venue security, giving me a nearly imperceptible nod. Zoe arrived moments later, hugging me with genuine warmth while whispering, "Everything's in place. You've got this." The moment I discovered, the full extent of the plot against me remains crystal clear in my memory. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 6 weeks before my due date. Marcus had left his laptop open on his desk while he took a shower, something he never did. Perhaps he was growing careless, confident that I had accepted my fate as a soon-to-be mother stepping away from her career. Or perhaps the stress of orchestrating this takeover was causing him to slip up. Either way, the glowing screen with an email chain titled "Reed Foster Transition Timeline" was impossible to ignore. I hesitated only briefly before sitting down to read. The correspondence between Marcus, Harold, and the foster family attorney detailed their strategy with cold precision. They had begun planning this takeover within months of our wedding, accelerating their timeline when they learned about my pregnancy. The baby shower was highlighted as the optimal execution point, with notes about the psychological advantages of a public setting with family present. What chilled me most was the clinical way they discussed me, as if I were a business obstacle, rather than a person, certainly not a beloved wife or daughter-in-law. Natalie will likely experience heightened emotional vulnerability in the 3rd trimester, Marcus had written. Her desire to avoid conflict during what should be a celebration will increase the probability of compliance. The email included an attachment, a psychological profile a private investigator had compiled about me, analyzing my potential reactions and weaknesses. They had studied me like an opponent, looking for pressure points and vulnerabilities. The document noted my close relationship with my small team at Innovate Tech, suggesting that emphasizing the continued employment of her loyal staff under foster group management might be an effective bargaining chip. I forwarded the entire thread to my secure email account, my hands trembling with a combination of rage and vindication. This wasn't just family pressure or a difference in values. It was a calculated conspiracy to divest me of my company, using my pregnancy as leverage. The level of manipulation was breathtaking. The bathroom door opened, and I quickly closed the laptop, moving to the bedroom window as if I'd been gazing outside all along. Marcus emerged in a cloud of steam, towel around, his waist, another over his shoulders. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my expression. I forced a smile. "Just thinking about the baby. And the shower next week." His face softened. "Mom's gone all out. It's going to be perfect." He crossed the room to kiss my forehead. "You've seemed more relaxed lately. I'm glad you're finally focused on what matters." It took every ounce of self-control to lean into his touch instead of recoiling. "I'm seeing things more clearly now," I replied, the double meaning of my words lost on him. That afternoon, I met with Catherine Zhao in a coffee shop 3 neighborhoods away from our home. I chose a back corner table, angled to see anyone entering, a new habit born of justified paranoia. "This is extremely valuable evidence," Catherine said after reviewing the forwarded emails on her secure tablet. "There's a clear paper trail of intent to coerce and defraud. The psychological profile is particularly damning. It shows premeditation and malice." "What's my next step?" I asked. "We need to prepare for their move at the baby shower," she said. "Based on these emails, they've invested significant planning into that moment. They expect you to be emotionally vulnerable, surrounded by their allies and caught off guard by the formality of the documents. She outlined a counter-strategy: prepare legally, gather evidence of the attempt, and have a response ready that would protect both me and my company. The key is to appear unaware until they make their move, she advised. Let them believe their plan is working. As Catherine spoke, the reality of my situation washed over me. The man I had married, the man whose child I was carrying, had been plotting against me almost from the beginning. The in-laws I had tried so hard to please saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to their family's expansion plans. The marriage I had believed in, despite its challenges, was built on calculation rather than love. I should have seen it sooner, I said, voicing the thought that had been haunting me. Catherine reached across the table to touch my hand, a rare gesture from the typically formal attorney. Mrs. Foster, Natalie, you're not the first successful woman to be targeted this way. The Fosters identified your company as an acquisition target and determined that marriage was the most efficient path to control. That's on them, not you. Her words provided cold comfort, but comfort nonetheless. I wasn't naive or foolish. I was the victim of a sophisticated scheme by people who made a practice of such manipulation. I spent the next several days gathering additional evidence while maintaining the appearance of a content wife preparing for motherhood. I discovered financial documents showing that the Foster Group was not as financially stable as they projected. Several of their real estate holdings were leveraged to the hilt, and their medical facility investments were underperforming. Innovate Tech, with its innovative technology and growing client base, would provide a much-needed infusion of valuable assets. I also learned that this wasn't the first time the Foster family had absorbed a company through marriage. Harold's sister had married the founder of a promising medical device startup 20 years earlier. Within 2 years of the marriage, the company had been folded into the Foster Group, and the founder had been sidelined with a consulting role that gradually diminished. The pattern was there, if I had known to look for it. With Catherine's help, I put legal protections in place, updated operating agreements for Innovate Tech that required specific procedures for any ownership transfer, documentation of the company's development history and my intellectual contribution, and contingency plans for leadership if I needed to step away temporarily after giving birth. Tyler was invaluable during this time, running interference at the office and ensuring our technical infrastructure was secure. Marcus stopped by again yesterday, he reported during one of our secure calls. Asked very pointed questions about our client contracts and whether they would transfer under new ownership. What did you tell him? I asked. That most of our hospital relationships are built on personal trust with you specifically, Tyler replied. It's true, and not what he wanted to hear. The security team Catherine had recommended, led by Dominic Carter, proved to be thorough and discreet. They swept my devices for spyware, finding several instances, secured my communications, and helped document the Fosters' activities. Dominic himself, a former military intelligence officer with a calm demeanor and watchful eyes, took charge of the security plan for the baby shower. Based on the emails you've shared, we anticipate they'll make their move during the gift opening portion of the event, he explained during our planning session. Maximum audience attention, emotional high point, and they'll be controlling the sequence of events. We developed countersignals and backup plans. Dominic's team would be positioned throughout the venue, one posing as waitstaff, another as a photographer's assistant, and Dominic himself as venue security. All would be wearing discreet recording devices. Catherine would be on standby with legal documents of our own, ready to respond to whatever the Fosters presented. Don't engage. Immediately, Dominic advised. Let them make their full play. Yet, in the face of this painful reality, I had found strength I didn't know I possessed. I had protected what I built. I had refused to be manipulated or controlled. And perhaps most importantly, I had begun setting an example for my unborn daughter about standing up for oneself, even when it's difficult, even when it means standing alone. The security team escorted me to a secure apartment that Tyler had arranged through a company connection. As I settled into the unfamiliar space that would be my temporary home, I felt the baby move vigorously, as if expressing her own approval of our newfound independence. "It's just you and me now, little one," I whispered, resting my hands on my belly. "But we're going to be okay. Better than okay." For the first time in months, I believed it. The aftermath of the baby shower confrontation unfolded with the same calculating precision that had characterized the foster family's original plan, except now I was the one in control of the narrative. Standing in that elegant venue with the remnants of pink decorations being cleared away, I had made a decision that would permanently alter the course of my life and my daughter's future. There would be no going back, no reconciliation, no compromise. That would leave any part of my company or my autonomy in the foster's hands. Detective Wilson escorted Marcus and Harold to the police station for questioning about their communications with HealthStream Technologies. While corporate espionage charges weren't guaranteed, the investigation alone would send ripples through Seattle's business community. The Fosters had always traded on their reputation for integrity and old money respectability. Even the suggestion of impropriety would damage them in ways their wealth couldn't easily repair. Judith remained at the venue long after the guests had departed, her social mask finally cracking to reveal the fury beneath. "This display was completely unnecessary," she hissed as Catherine and I prepared to leave. "You could have discussed your concerns privately, like civilized people. Instead, you've created a spectacle that hurts everyone, including your unborn child." "The spectacle was your design, Judith," I replied calmly. "You chose a public setting to pressure me into compliance. You didn't expect me to resist, that's all." Her eyes narrowed. "You have no idea what you've done. The Fosters have been in Seattle for 5 generations. We have connections you can't begin to imagine. Your little company won't survive this." Catherine stepped between us. "Mrs. Foster, I suggest you speak with your family attorney before making statements that could be construed as threats. Your family's influence won't protect you from consequences." Dominic and his team escorted me to a secure apartment that Tyler had arranged through company connections. The location was known only to my innermost circle: Tyler, Zoe, Catherine, and Dominic himself. The space was impersonal but comfortable, equipped with everything I would need for the coming weeks, including advanced security measures and a home office setup that would allow me to continue running Innovate Tech remotely. As the security team conducted a final sweep of the apartment, I stood by the window watching Seattle's skyline fade into twilight. The enormity of what had happened, what I had done, was finally sinking in. I had publicly accused my husband and his family of fraud and manipulation. I had initiated divorce proceedings while 7 months pregnant. I had torpedoed my connection to one of Seattle's most influential families. And yet, beneath the anxiety and uncertainty, I felt a profound sense of rightness. For months, I had been living a lie, pretending to accept the Fosters' vision for my future while secretly planning my defense. Now, everything was in the open. Whatever happened next, I would face it honestly, on my own terms. "The apartment is secure," Dominic reported, joining me at the window. "We've installed additional monitoring on the building entrances and the elevator to this floor. My team will maintain a rotation outside your door for the next 72 hours, until we're confident the immediate situation has stabilized." "Do you think they'll try something?" I asked. His expression remained professionally neutral. "The Fosters have just suffered a significant public embarrassment. People in that position sometimes react impulsively. Better to be cautious." After Dominic left, Zoe arrived with the gifts from the shower, the legitimate ones, baby items rather than legal documents designed to strip me of my company. She helped me settle in, ordering dinner and unpacking essentials with the practical efficiency that had made her such a valuable friend. "How are you really doing?" she asked as we sat in the living room with containers of Thai food between us. I considered the question carefully. Strangely calm, like I've been holding my breath for months and can finally exhale. She nodded. That makes sense. You've been living under siege. She hesitated, then added, Have you thought about what happens if Marcus contests the divorce? If he tries to claim parental rights? The question sent a chill through me. In my focus on protecting Innovate Tech, I hadn't fully processed the implications for my daughter. Catherine mentioned that the evidence of manipulation strengthens my position, but ultimately courts favor shared custody when possible. You'd be okay with that? After everything he's done? I rested my hands on my belly, feeling the baby's movements. I don't know. I want to believe Marcus would be a good father, that his manipulations were about business, not our child. But I don't know if I can trust that anymore. That night, alone in the unfamiliar apartment, sleep eluded me. My phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Marcus, alternating between anger, disbelief, and attempts at reconciliation. This is a misunderstanding, one text read. Let me explain everything. Then, an hour later, You've made a terrible mistake. My father's attorneys will destroy you. And finally, near midnight, Please, Nat, think about our daughter. We can work this out. I didn't respond to any of them, following Catherine's advice to maintain communication only through legal channels. Instead, I focused on the practical steps ahead, securing Innovate Tech against potential retaliation, preparing for single motherhood, and navigating what would likely be a contentious divorce. The next morning brought the first wave of consequences. The Seattle Business Chronicle published an article titled Foster Family Scandal: Attempted Corporate Takeover Through Marriage. The story was careful to present both sides, but the damage to the Foster's reputation was evident. Several comments from sources close to the family suggested that Innovate Tech had been targeted specifically because of its valuable healthcare technology patents and its potential acquisition by HealthStream. By midday, Tyler reported that 3 members of the Foster Group's board of directors had resigned, unwilling to be associated with the emerging scandal. Harold had been asked to step back from day-to-day operations pending an internal investigation. Marcus's position as Chief Strategy Officer at Pacific Northwest Medical Group was suddenly under review. Their whole house of cards is starting to collapse, Tyler said during our secure video call. We're getting calls from investors who previously wouldn't give us the time of day. Everyone wants to be associated with the underdog who stood up to the Foster machine. What about our existing contracts? I asked, concerned that the negative publicity might affect our hospital relationships. Rock solid. If anything, our hospital partners are reaffirming their commitment. Nobody wants to be seen siding with corporate espionage, especially not in healthcare. While the business implications were unfolding in my favor, the personal ramifications were more complex. My phone was flooded with messages from acquaintances and distant friends, some offering support, but many simply fishing for gossip. The story had spread through Seattle's social circles with predictable embellishments. According to some versions, I had planned the confrontation for months as revenge for Marcus's infidelity, non-existent, as far as I knew. Other versions cast me as a cold-blooded opportunist who had used the Foster name to elevate my company, and then discarded the family when they were no longer useful. Grace, Marcus's sister, called that afternoon, the only Foster family member to reach out directly rather than through attorneys. I want you to know I had no idea what they were planning, she said, her voice tight with emotion. I knew Mother and Father were pressuring you about the company, but I never imagined they'd go this far. Would it have made a difference if you had known? I asked, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. She was silent for a long moment. I want to say yes, but honestly, I don't know. The Fosters have a certain way of doing things. Going against the family consensus is difficult. I'm discovering that, I replied dryly. For what it's worth, I think what you did was brave. Terrifying for the family, but brave. She paused. I'd like to still be in my niece's life if that's possible. I promise to consider it, touched by her gesture but wary of maintaining any foster connection that could be used against me. Grace had always been the most independent member of the family, having fought her own battles to maintain her legal career despite Harold and Judith's disapproval. Still, her loyalty ultimately lay with her family, and I couldn't risk exposing myself or my daughter to further manipulation. Catherine called that evening with updates on the legal front. Marcus has retained Philip Montgomery as divorce counsel, she reported. Montgomery was one of Seattle's most aggressive divorce attorneys, known for scorched earth tactics that left both parties financially and emotionally drained. This suggests they're planning to fight rather than negotiate. What's their leverage? I asked. We have documentation of their plans. We have witnesses to the attempted coercion. They'll likely attack your fitness as a mother, Catherine said bluntly. They'll argue that your focus on your company makes you unable to provide proper care and attention to your child. They'll position Marcus and his family as stable, traditional caregivers with resources and time to devote to your daughter. The strategy was so predictable, so perfectly aligned with the foster family's worldview, that I almost laughed. So, they're doubling down on the same argument they used to try to take my company, that I can't be both a CEO and a mother. Exactly. It's a narrative that still resonates with some judges, unfortunately. We'll counter with evidence of your preparations for balanced motherhood and work, emphasis on your strong support network, and of course, the documentation showing the foster's manipulative behavior. The following days fell into a new rhythm. Mornings were dedicated to Innovate Tech, with Tyler and I conducting business virtually while our legal team reinforced our corporate protections. Afternoons focused on prenatal care and preparation for my daughter's arrival, now complicated by the need for heightened security and the absence of my planned support person. Evenings were consumed by legal strategy sessions with Catherine, documenting every interaction with the Fosters and building our case for both the divorce and potential custody battle. 1 week after the baby shower confrontation, Marcus requested a meeting. Catherine advised against it, but I felt a need for closure, or at least clarity, about how our relationship had deteriorated so completely. We met at Catherine's office, neutral territory with the additional security of her staff's presence. Marcus arrived looking nothing like the polished, confident man I had married. His normally perfect hair was uncombed, his designer clothes wrinkled, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the connection we had once shared, or that I had believed we shared. Thank you for agreeing to see me, he began, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. I wanted to talk without lawyers if possible. Just us. Catherine stays, I replied firmly, but we can speak directly. He nodded, accepting this boundary. What happened at the shower? I know how it looked. But you have to understand, the foster group has operated the same way for generations. Bringing promising businesses into the family fold is what we do. So you admit you married me to acquire my company? The direct question hung in the air between us. No, I married you because you were brilliant and beautiful and unlike anyone I'd ever met. His expression seemed genuinely pained. The company was a consideration, yes, but not the reason. A consideration, I repeated flatly. Along with my willingness to set aside my career for motherhood, my amenability to foster family control, my usefulness in your family's expansion plans. You're twisting everything. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Yes, my parents were interested in Innovate Tech's potential. Yes, there were discussions about eventually bringing it under the foster group umbrella. But that's business, Natalie. It doesn't mean what we had wasn't real. What we had, I said slowly, was a relationship built on calculation and manipulation. You studied me like an opponent, Marcus. You had a psychological profile created to identify my vulnerabilities. You plan to use our child, our daughter, as emotional leverage to take my company. That was my father's idea, he protested weakly. Things got out of hand, but we can fix this. We can start over, create proper boundaries with my family. I studied him, trying to separate truth from manipulation. Was this genuine remorse, or simply another strategy now that the original plan had failed? The sad reality was that I could no longer trust my own judgment where Marcus was concerned. He had expertly played on my emotions before. I couldn't risk falling for the same tactics again. I don't see a path forward for us, Marcus, I said finally. Too much has been revealed about your true priorities and your willingness to deceive me. I can't rebuild trust after that, and I won't expose our daughter to that kind of dysfunction. His expression hardened, the vulnerability disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. If that's your decision, I won't beg. But understand that I will not be excluded from my child's life. The Fosters protect their own, and my daughter is a foster whether you like it or not. Genetics don't make a family, I replied. Actions do. And your actions have shown exactly what kind of family the Fosters really are. He left without another word, the meeting accomplishing little beyond confirming that reconciliation was impossible. Whatever feelings had once existed between us had been poisoned by deception and betrayal. The focus now had to be on protecting my daughter and myself from further manipulation. That evening, alone in the secure apartment, I felt the baby move, vigorously as if responding to the day's tension. I placed my hands on my belly, trying to transmit calm and reassurance. "We're going to be okay," I whispered. "We don't need the Fosters or their legacy. We'll create our own." The legal battle escalated over the following weeks. As Catherine had predicted, the Fosters' strategy centered on questioning my fitness as a mother, while positioning Marcus as the stable, traditional parent backed by an established family support system. They filed motions requesting preliminary custody arrangements that would give Marcus significant decision-making power and extensive visitation rights immediately after birth. Their legal filings carefully avoided mentioning the baby shower incident or the attempted corporate takeover, instead focusing on my workaholic tendencies and prioritization of business over family. They submitted affidavits from foster family friends who had attended dinner parties where I had allegedly discussed business rather than children, demonstrating my lack of maternal instinct. Catherine countered with evidence of my extensive preparations for balanced motherhood. The nursery I had designed, the carefully researched childcare arrangements, the flexible work schedule I had developed with Tyler's support. She also submitted documentation of the foster family's manipulation, including the psychological profile they had commissioned, and emails discussing using my pregnancy as leverage for business purposes. "They're trying to control the narrative," Catherine explained during one strategy session. "If they can establish you as career-obsessed and themselves as traditional family-first caregivers, they believe they can overcome the evidence of manipulation. It's a calculated risk on their part." The stress of the legal battle combined with the advanced pregnancy was taking its toll. My blood pressure had elevated, prompting my obstetrician to recommend reduced activities and more frequent monitoring. The irony wasn't lost on me. The Fosters' actions were creating the very health concerns they could then use to argue I was struggling with the demands of impending motherhood. Tyler stepped up during this period, taking on more operational responsibilities at Innovate Tech while keeping me informed of all key decisions. "Your job is to stay healthy and grow that baby," he insisted during our daily calls. "The company is solid. We just landed the Providence Hospital System contract, and 3 more are in final negotiations. Focus on yourself for once." Zoe became my lifeline to normalcy, staying over several nights a week and accompanying me to medical appointments. She deflected the curious stares and whispers that followed me in public, the story of the baby shower confrontation having made me a minor celebrity in certain Seattle circles. "People are calling you the tech mom warrior," she reported with a mixture of amusement and pride. You've become something of a symbol for women refusing to be sidelined by pregnancy or marriage. I wasn't entirely comfortable with this public persona that had been thrust upon me. I hadn't confronted the Fosters to make a statement or become a symbol. I had simply protected what was mine, my company, and my autonomy. But if my actions helped other women recognize and resist manipulation, perhaps some good could come from this painful chapter. As my due date approached, the legal maneuvering intensified. The Fosters filed an emergency motion requesting that Marcus be present at the birth and that the baby receive the foster family name regardless of the divorce proceedings status. Catherine countered with hospital security concerns given the hostile nature of the separation, offering a compromise where Marcus could visit the baby shortly after birth but would not be in the delivery room. The judge, a woman in her 60s, with a reputation for no-nonsense pragmatism, seemed unimpressed by both sides' arguments. This court is concerned that the welfare of the child is being overshadowed by corporate interests and family disputes, she noted during one hearing. I strongly encourage both parties to remember that a child's needs must come before business considerations or personal vendettas. Her comment struck home, reminding me that amid all the legal strategies and corporate protections, a very real baby, my daughter, was about to enter this complicated situation. Whatever happened with Marcus and the Fosters, she deserved parents who could put her needs first, who could separate their personal conflicts from her well-being. With this in mind, I authorized Catherine to propose a preliminary co-parenting framework, offering Marcus regular visitation and input on major decisions while maintaining primary physical custody with me. The proposal included strict boundaries regarding the foster family's involvement and explicit prohibitions against using our daughter in any business-related manipulations. Marcus's response came through his attorney, a counter-proposal that accepted most of my terms, but insisted on the baby carrying the foster name and spending one weekend a month at the foster family estate on Whidbey Island after she reached 6 months of age. The cultural and historical connection to the foster legacy is part of the child's birthright, his lawyer argued, regardless of the parent's marital status. I was prepared to fight this point, unwilling to concede anything that would give the Fosters leverage over my daughter's identity or future. But Catherine cautioned patience. This may be more about saving face than actual control, she advised. The foster name is their most valuable asset. Allowing your daughter to carry, it gives them the appearance of continuity, even if their actual influence is limited by our other terms. After considerable reflection, I agreed to a hyphenated surname, Reed Foster, that acknowledged both her heritage and my independence. It was a small concession that secured Marcus's agreement to the more substantive protective measures I had demanded. 2 weeks before my due date, with the preliminary custody framework in place and Innovate Tech securely insulated from foster interference, I finally allowed myself to focus fully on the impending birth. The secure apartment had been transformed with a simple but beautiful nursery, painted in soothing greens and yellows rather than the traditional pink Judith had insisted upon. A hospital bag was packed, birth plan finalized, and Zoe prepared to serve as my support person in the delivery room. The relative calm was shattered when Tyler called with alarming news. HealthStream Technologies had announced a major new patient monitoring system that bore striking similarities to Innovate Tech's proprietary algorithm. The timing suggested they had indeed received insider information, likely from Marcus or Harold during their clandestine meetings. We need to file for an immediate injunction, Tyler urged. If they bring this to market before we can prove infringement, the damage to our business could be irreparable. I authorized our legal team to proceed with the injunction while trying to maintain the reduced stress my doctor had mandated. This new development threatened not just Innovate Tech's current success, but its long-term viability, exactly the vulnerability the Fosters had likely planned to exploit in their original takeover strategy. Without my company, I would have been financially dependent on Marcus, making resistance to their control far more difficult. The realization strengthened my resolve. I had been right to stand firm at the baby shower, to refuse the documents Marcus had tried to pressure me into signing. Had I wavered even momentarily, had I sought to avoid conflict or maintain appearances, I might now be watching helplessly as my life's work was dismantled and repurposed to serve foster family interests. That night, as I sat in the nursery rocking chair, hands resting on my belly, I made a silent promise to my daughter. I would fight to protect what I had built, not just for my own sake, but for hers. She would grow up knowing that her mother had refused to be silenced or sidelined, had maintained her independence and her integrity even when it would have been easier to surrender. And someday, whatever path she chose for herself, she would have the strength to defend it against anyone who tried to take it from her, even those who claimed to love her. The contractions began at 3 a.m, 2 weeks earlier than my due date. I woke suddenly to a tightening sensation across my abdomen, distinctive enough that I knew immediately what was happening. My doctor had warned that stress could trigger early labor, and despite my best efforts to remain calm, the preceding weeks had been anything but peaceful. I called Zoe first, then my doctor, timing the contractions as they grew steadily stronger. By the time Zoe arrived, disheveled, but alert, the contractions were coming 8 minutes apart. "The security team is ready to escort us to the hospital," she reported, helping me into comfortable clothes and grabbing the packed hospital bag. "Dominic has arranged everything according to the protocol Catherine developed." The protocol had been necessary after we discovered that a reporter from the Seattle Sentinel had been bribed by someone in the foster circle to alert them when I was admitted to the hospital. The story of the baby shower confrontation had developed legs beyond Seattle's social circles, becoming emblematic of larger conversations about women in business and the pressures they face. The last thing I needed was media attention or foster family drama during labor. We took the service elevator down to the garage where Dominic waited with an unmarked car. The night was clear and cool, the streets of Seattle nearly empty at that early hour. Between contractions, I gazed out at the city lights, struck by how dramatically my life had changed in such a short time. Just months ago, I had been preparing for this moment very differently, expecting Marcus by my side, planning for our child to join the illustrious foster family legacy. "Any regrets?" Zoe asked quietly, as if reading my thoughts. I considered the question as another contraction built and receded. "About standing up to them? None. About believing in Marcus in the first place? That's more complicated." We arrived at Northwest Memorial through the staff entrance, where my obstetrician, Dr. Chen, was waiting. A trusted member of the hospital security team escorted us to a delivery room registered under a pseudonym. These precautions might have seemed excessive, but the Fosters' reactions to the baby shower confrontation had been unpredictable enough to warrant caution. "Your blood pressure is elevated," Dr. Chen noted after checking my vitals. "Not dangerously so, but we'll need to monitor it closely. The baby's heartbeat is strong, which is excellent." Labor progressed steadily over the next several hours. I walked the corridors with Zoe's support, breathed through increasingly intense contractions, and tried to focus on the moment rather than the complicated future that awaited. Tyler called with updates about Innovate Tech. The injunction against HealthStream had been granted, temporarily halting their launch of the suspiciously similar technology, but Zoe intercepted these messages, protecting my concentration. As morning brightened into afternoon, labor intensified. The controlled breathing techniques gave way to more primal responses as my body worked to bring my daughter into the world. Zoe remained steadfast, offering encouragement and practical support without the emotional complications that Marcus's presence would have brought. At 3:27 p.m., after 16 hours of labor, my daughter arrived with a powerful cry that seemed to announce her readiness to face whatever complexities awaited her. "She's perfect," Dr. Chen declared, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on my chest. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, all fingers and toes accounted for. I gazed down at this tiny person, overwhelmed by a love so fierce and protective it momentarily eclipsed everything else: the divorce proceedings, the corporate espionage, the foster family machinations. In that moment, nothing existed but this child, her delicate features still scrunched from the journey of birth, her tiny hands flexing as she adjusted to the bright, noisy world. "Hello, Sophia," I whispered, using the name I had chosen weeks earlier. Sophia Reed Foster, wisdom and strength from my lineage, with acknowledgement of her paternal heritage but not defined by it. As per our legal agreement, Catherine notified Marcus of the birth once Sophia and I were stable and settled in the recovery room. He arrived 2 hours later, his expression a complex mixture of emotions as he gazed at his daughter for the first time. "She's beautiful," he said softly, standing at a respectful distance from the bed. "She has your chin. But your eyes, I think," I replied, noticing the shape if not yet the color, which would develop over time. An awkward silence fell between us, the weight of all that had happened making this moment of shared joy impossible to navigate naturally. How did one co-parent with someone who had attempted to use their child as leverage in a corporate takeover? What kind of father would Marcus be, given all I now knew about his character and priorities? "I brought this for her," he said finally, placing a small package on the bedside table. Inside was a silver rattle, elegant in its simplicity, with Sophia's initials engraved rather than the foster family crest I had half expected. It was a thoughtful gift, with no obvious agenda or manipulation behind it. "Thank you," I said, genuinely, touched by this small indication that perhaps, where his daughter was concerned, Marcus might be capable of setting aside foster family ambitions. He stayed for 30 minutes, awkwardly holding Sophia when I offered, asking appropriate questions about her health and care, but carefully avoiding any discussion of our ongoing legal battles. It was a temporary truce, born of the sanctity of this new life we had created together, despite everything else that had gone wrong. After he left, promising to visit again the following day during the designated hours our agreement allowed, Zoe returned with herbal tea and a sympathetic expression. "That seemed almost civilized," she observed cautiously. "For Sophia's sake, I hope it wasn't just for show," I replied, cradling my sleeping daughter. "She deserves better than to be a pawn in whatever game the Fosters decide to play next." The hospital stay passed in a blur of nursing attempts, medical checks, and brief, carefully managed visits. Catherine had arranged for a temporary restraining order preventing Judith from visiting after we received word that she planned to bring a photographer from Seattle Social Magazine to capture the newest foster heiress. Marcus complied with the visitation schedule without complaint, coming alone each time and focusing solely on Sophia. 3 days after the birth, Tyler visited with news too significant to relay by phone. "The SEC has opened a formal investigation into the foster group," he reported in hushed tones as Sophia slept in her hospital bassinet. "Something about financial discrepancies that predate our situation, but were flagged during the increased scrutiny after the baby shower incident." "How serious is it?" I asked, thinking of the implications for Marcus and, by extension, for Sophia. "Potentially very serious. There are rumors of misappropriated investor funds, falsified financial statements, the works." He hesitated. "There's more. We've been approached about a potential acquisition, not by HealthStream or the Foster Group, but by Meridian Healthcare. Their CEO reached out directly, extremely interested in our patient monitoring technology. Meridian was one of the largest healthcare systems in the country, with the resources to scale Innovate Tech's innovations nationwide. Under different circumstances, such interest would have been cause for celebration." "What are the terms?" I asked, professional instincts kicking in despite my exhaustion and the postpartum hormones flooding my system. "Preliminary, but very favorable. They're offering 3 times our current valuation, with guarantees for the team's continued employment and your role as head of innovation if you want it. He smiled slightly. I think they're trying to position themselves as the ethical alternative to HealthStream after the attempted corporate espionage became public. I promised to review the offer once I was home with Sophia, though the irony wasn't lost on me. After fighting so hard to prevent the Fosters from forcing me to sell my company, I was now considering a voluntary sale under terms that respected my team and my vision. The day we were discharged from the hospital, Seattle was experiencing one of its rare perfect summer days. Clear blue skies, mild temperatures, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of salt water from the Sound. Dominic's security team escorted us to a different apartment from the one I had occupied before the birth, another precaution against unwanted visitors or media attention. This new space had been prepared with meticulous care. A fully equipped nursery decorated in the soothing green and yellow palette I had chosen. A comfortable rocking chair positioned near windows overlooking a quiet courtyard, a kitchen stocked, with easy meals and snacks for late-night feeding sessions. Zoe had arranged everything according to the plans we had made weeks earlier, creating a sanctuary where Sophia and I could begin our life together, away from the chaos of legal proceedings and corporate battles. The first weeks of motherhood passed in the timeless rhythm of newborn care, feeding, changing, brief periods of sleep punctuated by Sophia's hungry cries, or simply my own need to check that she was still breathing, still perfect, still mine. Zoe stayed for the first week, then transitioned to daily visits. Tyler managed Innovate Tech remotely, sending only the most essential updates for my input. Catherine handled the ongoing legal matters, shielding me from all but the most critical decisions. Marcus adhered to the visitation schedule with surprising respect for boundaries. He came 3 times weekly for short visits, gradually growing more comfortable holding Sophia and participating in her care. He never brought other foster family members, never attempted to discuss business or divorce proceedings, never overstepped the careful parameters we had established. 1 month after Sophia's birth, as I was settling into a more sustainable routine and beginning to re-engage with Innovate Tech's operations, Catherine arrived with significant news. The foster group's financial troubles had deepened considerably, with the SEC investigation leading to a dramatic restructuring. Harold had been forced to step down as CEO, replaced by an external executive brought in to salvage what remained of the company's reputation. Several properties, including the Whidbey Island estate, had been quietly listed for sale. Marcus's position has been eliminated in the restructuring, Catherine reported. He's essentially unemployed, with significant personal liability for some of the financial improprieties the investigation has uncovered. The revelation shifted the power dynamic of our ongoing divorce and custody negotiations. Marcus, once backed by the formidable foster family fortune and influence, was now potentially facing legal jeopardy of his own. His financial future, once seemingly bulletproof, was suddenly precarious. Has he indicated how this affects his position regarding Sophia? I asked, concerned less about the divorce terms than about my daughter's relationship with her father. That's why I came in person, Catherine replied, her expression softening. He's requested a meeting outside of court to discuss a revised custody arrangement. His attorney indicated he's willing to concede primary decision-making authority to you in exchange for preserved visitation rights. The meeting took place in Catherine's office the following day, with Sophia asleep in her carrier beside me. Marcus arrived alone, without his high-powered attorney, dressed in noticeably less expensive clothes than his usual designer attire. The physical changes in him were striking: weight loss, new lines around his eyes, a gravity that hadn't been present before. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he began, his gaze moving briefly to Sophia before returning to me. "I wanted to discuss our arrangements directly, without legal filters if possible." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "My family situation has changed significantly," he acknowledged, the understatement almost comical given the foster group's very public implosion. "I'm no longer in a position to provide the financial security or social advantages I once promised. but I still want to be part of Sophia's life. A meaningful part, not just the every other weekend father who never really knows his child. What are you proposing? I asked cautiously. I'll withdraw all challenges to your primary custody and decision-making authority. I won't contest the divorce terms your attorney has proposed regarding financial settlements. In exchange, I want regular, consistent time with Sophia as she grows. He hesitated. And I want your word that you won't use my family's disgrace against me, that you'll give me the chance to be a better father than I was a husband. The sincerity in his voice was unlike anything I had heard from him before, lacking the calculated charm that had once characterized his interactions. Whether from necessity or genuine change, Marcus seemed to be offering an honest truce. Why should I trust this? I asked, the central question that would determine everything. How do I know this isn't another strategy, another manipulation? He met my gaze directly. Because I have nothing left to manipulate with. The foster name, once my greatest asset, is now a liability. The family fortune is being dissected by investigators and creditors. The connections I relied on have disappeared overnight. He glanced at sleeping Sophia. She's all I have left that matters. I won't risk losing her by playing games. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity the choice before me. I could use Marcus's downfall to marginalize him completely in Sophia's life, leveraging his family's disgrace to secure even greater control and independence. Or I could accept that people sometimes change when stripped of their illusions and privileges, that the father Sophia needed might be the humbled man before me, rather than the entitled scion who had tried to claim my company. I'll agree to regular visitation and shared holidays, I said finally. But at the first sign that you're using Sophia as leverage for anything, reconciliation, business advantages, social rehabilitation, it stops. She is not a pawn or a prop or a foster legacy project. She's a person who deserves parents who put her needs first, always. I understand, he said quietly. Thank you. 6 months later, Innovate Tech completed its acquisition by Meridian Healthcare, under terms that preserved our core mission and team while providing the resources to scale our patient monitoring technology nationwide. I transitioned to a role as Chief Innovation Officer, balancing leadership responsibilities with the flexibility to be present for Sophia's major developmental milestones. The foster family's fall from Seattle's social prominence continued, with Judith and Harold eventually relocating to their smaller property in Palm Springs to escape the constant reminders of their diminished status. Marcus remained in Seattle, rebuilding his life from scratch with a humility that would have been unimaginable before. He adhered scrupulously to our co-parenting agreement, never missing a visitation, never bringing foster family drama into Sophia's life. On Sophia's first birthday, we held a small celebration at my new home, a comfortable house in a quiet neighborhood, purchased with my portion of the acquisition proceeds. The guest list was limited to those who had supported us through the tumultuous year: Zoe, Tyler, Catherine, Dominic, a few close friends who had proven their loyalty. Marcus arrived with an age-appropriate gift and no hidden agenda, greeting my friends without the condescension that had once characterized his interactions with Natalie's people. He sat on the floor to help Sophia unwrap presents, laughed genuinely when she smashed cake on his expensive shirt, and departed at the agreed-upon time without resistance. As the party wound down, I stood in the kitchen with Zoe, watching through the window as Sophia explored the backyard garden with Tyler's patient assistance. "Could you have imagined this outcome a year ago?" Zoe asked, gesturing around at the peaceful scene. "When you were standing in that baby shower with Marcus trying to take your company." I considered the question carefully. "No," I admitted. "I was fighting for survival then, professional and personal. I couldn't see past the immediate battle. The security team I had hired for the baby shower had indeed changed everything, creating the opportunity for me to stand firm against manipulation and coercion. But the true transformation had come from within, From finding the courage to reject others' definitions of my capabilities and worth. From refusing to accept that motherhood and professional achievement were mutually exclusive. From trusting my own judgment despite powerful voices insisting I was wrong. Sophia toddled unsteadily toward a butterfly, her face alight with discovery and joy. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that the example I was setting, of resilience, independence, and integrity, was the most valuable inheritance I could provide. Not a family name or a corporate empire, but the living demonstration that she need never surrender her dreams or her autonomy to anyone, no matter how convincingly they claimed it was for her own good. Some lessons could only be learned through struggle and resistance. The security team I had hired changed everything that day at the baby shower. Yes, but it was my willingness to fight for what was rightfully mine that had truly transformed our future. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.